Gardening can get quite expensive, but it can also be very inexpensive, especially when you know how to make free pots to start your seeds in. And that's what I'm going to show you today. Hi, I'm Gardener Scott, and I start a lot of seeds indoors before transplanting out into my garden. And I like to use trays like this, plastic reusable trays with 72 cells so that I can put a lot of seeds in the trays. But I also like to save money. And for those of you that might not already have a tray like this, there are great alternatives, free ways to make pots that you can grow the same seeds that I use my plastic tray for. In this video, I'll show you how to make toilet paper roll pots and newspaper pots, in addition to a few others that don't require any handiwork at all. Let's go ahead and start with the newspaper pot. Now for this, you need a small can. And by small, I think shorter tends to work better. Now this is a tomato sauce can. I really like tomato paste cans that are a little narrower. Either way, you want to measure the height of your can. This is 3 inches. For the best result, you should try to double that height when you determine the width of your paper. So I'm going to use newspaper that is twice the 3 inches, so it's 6 inches wide. Coincidentally, my newspaper is 12 inches wide, so all I have to do is just cut this sheet of newspaper in half. To make it even simpler, you don't have to cut. So if you take the newspaper, choose about the midpoint, and then tear the long ways, you don't even have to cut at all. And then we're going to take one of these strips and form it around a can. Now I'm going to show you this whole process start to finish, and then I'll go back and do a close-up so you can see exactly what I'm doing. I lay the newspaper out, and I take my can and I roll up the can in the newspaper. I take one end and fold it over on the bottom. Now I have this little yogurt cup filled with water. I think it helps to wet the bottom a little bit so that it doesn't unwrap right away. And then we just remove the can. Grab the bottom of the newspaper just to pinch it a little bit, and you'll see that the can slides right out. Then we're going to fold over the top, and this will help hold it all together. And now we're left with a little pot. We can fill our pot with a seed starter mix. And you can see it holds together very nicely. So let me show you that again. I have my can. I have my strip of newspaper. I place the can on the newspaper, and then I just roll it. And I like to have a long strip. I think if you do this with just a single sheet, it's not as strong. So after I roll it, it's pretty much double all the way around. And then I fold the bottom all the way around to try to hold it in place. Then I take some water and just wet it so the newspaper tends to hold that shape. I pinch the bottom and the can comes right out. Now I fold over the top going all the way around. This helps keep the sides in place as well. We have our little pot, and now I'll fill it with my potting soil. I've made a mess that I'll clean up here in just a minute, but that's what the newspaper pot looks like. You can see how easy and fast that is. You can crank out newspaper pots in virtually no time. One of the advantages to making pots out of paper is that the paper will decompose, and especially newspaper, when it gets wet, it's pretty fragile. And you can put this whole pot into the garden when it comes time to transplant. And the newspaper will eventually decompose, and because it's so weak, the roots will be able to grow right through it. You can use other types of paper, like paper bags. Now, if you use paper bags, I suggest using the thinner paper, like in one of these lunch bags. If you use that thicker paper, like in the big grocery bags, well, they take much longer to break down and they don't get as weak when they're wet, and so the roots might have trouble growing through it. Newspaper is really about the easiest and best way to go. Now, you can also do the same thing using little toilet paper tubes or paper towel tubes. For this, you will need an extra tool, a pair of scissors. So I'll show you the fast method and then the close-up once again. You just take this small tube, take your scissors, and you want to cut 4 slits in one end. This will be the bottom. Then you just fold over where you cut to form the bottom. Again, using the water, I'll just dunk the whole thing in so it soaks up the water a little bit. That helps the bottom hold together. And then I'll fill with my seed starter mix. And I have a toilet paper pot. So we take our small paper tube, we take our scissors, and then we cut a slit in the bottom. And I go to the opposite side so they match up pretty well. You turn it 90 degrees, cut another slit, and another slit in the bottom. And then we fold down each of these pieces to form the bottom of this pot. And you could stop here, but you can see how everything springs right back. So that's why I suggest putting it into the water for just a bit so that the cardboard of this tube can start soaking it up. And now when we fold it in, it tends to hold the shape a little bit better. And especially when we start putting in our soil mix, and then we set this down, it's going to hold the shape pretty well. You can also cut down paper towel rolls to any size you want and use the same basic method. Now, again, these toilet paper pots can be planted completely in the ground when you want to put these little plants into your garden. This is pretty tough, even when wet. And so I treat this a lot like a peat pot or a core pot or one of those other fibrous pots. And when it comes time to transplant, I'll actually cut slits in the whole thing and remove this cardboard as I'm transplanting it, just because it can be a barrier for some of those young roots. Now, another great method for using a free product to grow your seedlings is to take something like this. This is just a little lettuce container that I had, and you can fill this up with soil and plant in it. But it's important to recognize that you need some place for these paper pots to grow. So I like to use these containers to actually be where I put all of my paper pots. And you can put quite a few in here. And this is doubly great because I can pack all these together. The size of these pots will actually keep them from unraveling. By putting them side by side, they stay together. But I can close the top to hold in the humidity as my seeds begin to germinate. And I think that is an important aspect of seed starting, is to get that germination phase. Once they're germinated, you can open this up, you can cut off the top, and now these seedlings will be ready to grow. But you do need some place to put these pots, and while this is great as a container to grow in, it's ideal for holding these little paper containers. Staying with this basic theme, you can also use the cardboard egg cartons to start your seeds. Just fill both sides with your soil mix, and it's ideally suited for starting seeds. And like the other method using paper, you can transplant each of these individual pods. Now, I think this cardboard is a little thick and difficult for roots to grow through, so I'm not a big fan of using this particular method. But when I have done it, I'll take scissors, and when this is wet, they're relatively easy to pull apart, or I'll take my trusty utility knife and cut them apart. And then as I put them into the soil, I'll spread apart the cardboard so that the roots have some place to grow. Now, there's not a lot of space in these pods, so depending on what you're growing, it might not be enough room. For smaller seedlings, especially the ones that you're intending to transplant, you can use something like this. And you may have seen or heard about using the actual egg shell as a way to start your seeds. I'm not a fan of that at all, because the eggshell is definitely too hard for the roots to grow through. And when you have to crack the eggshell and try to figure out how to transplant it, you end up damaging the seedling itself. So I don't use the eggshells, but I will use the egg carton as a method that you can do for free. There are many, many other options for free containers. These, however, don't allow you to transplant the whole thing, but they're great for starting seeds as pots. And one of my favorites is a yogurt cup. I eat a lot of yogurt, and I reuse the yogurt cups as a seed starting pot. Now, it's important that anything that you use along these lines have some type of drainage. So I'll use my utility knife, and I'll just put some slits in the bottom, and this is enough to provide drainage. And then with some soil, it's all ready to go. You're probably like me in not liking water bottles. I try not to use them much at all, but when I do, I reuse them as much as possible in the garden. And again, taking my utility knife or scissors, I'll put some holes in the bottom for drainage. And then you just cut it in half, or whatever height you want. And you have a little seed starter pot. And to help keep the humidity level high while these seeds are germinating, you can take the top and cover it until the seedlings start to emerge. The sky is the limit when it comes to finding free containers that you can use to start seeds. Now, sure, I had to buy the yogurt in the first place, but by reusing containers, I'm not throwing this plastic out. I'm not adding to landfills. Instead, I'm finding free methods that I can use to start seeds. Like this one. This is a container that housed 4 tomatoes. You may have seen these with apples. What a waste of plastic, but it's ideal for starting seeds. I fill it with soil, and like before, I can close the top, and this holds in the humidity so that the germination and the growth of those young seedlings can be ideal. I'll reuse whatever plastic drink container I can find, or a salsa container. The idea is look around your house and see what you have. And don't think that it has to be one of these fancy plastic pots that you buy. Something that you find and reuse is just as good. To learn more about starting seeds and to really use these methods in the best way possible, I suggest you watch one of these Gardener Scott videos next. I'm Gardener Scott. Enjoy gardening.